So what exactly is a spiritual journey? Is it doing ayahuasca up in the mountains? Is it meditation every day? Is it some sense of practice that you feel you have to implement in your life in order to attain this sense of higher consciousness that no one else can see through your third eye chakra? You see how all these words can be beautiful but overwhelming at the same time. I want people to remember that the spiritual journey is a practice. It also is a discipline, and it's going to have its own rules and ideologies as well as language, just like any other man-made topic, subject, or practice. What we want to remember is the spiritual journey in itself is not dogma. It can become that if you allow yourself to follow the practices and, I would say, ideals of others versus tapping into your inner self. The spiritual journey at its core is about learning how to align your spiritual, soulful, whatever this is inside of this vessel, once this body passes, wherever our energy goes, that it is at its most lightest form to return back to what we call source creation. All energy has density levels. It vibrates at different levels. It expands and contracts at different, I would say, levels as well. Right? Because we have to remember that water in itself can be ice or it can be steam. This is energy expanding itself in many different ways. But at the end of the day, it can become solid or it can become a vapor. We, as the soul inside of this body, have the same opportunity to understand that if you decide to live in a life of indulgence and gluttony and I'm gonna get you back, pettiness, retaliation, that is literally creating your soul to a point of being ice. It is going to feel heavy, it's going to feel cold, it's going to feel stuck, literally frozen in time, because it's not doing the work that it's meant to do on this human plane, in this 3D masculine world. Now, with that being said, the soul also has the opportunity to release its burdens of the past, to allow itself to then go from what was stagnant to loose and fluid and water-like, to then, once it heats up and becomes higher conscious self, what we call, then it evaporates back into the environment and becomes one with the universe. Beautiful in speech, but hard to do in practice because the human vessel is a living, breathing creature. And in my perspective, in my opinion, for centuries on end, the long battle of what we call good and evil has been between the human body's free will to understand that it is an intelligent being that can make its own free will decisions. But the soul still has its own separate journey that it must fulfill and complete, which is why movies like and cartoons like Avatar became so prevalent, at least in my childhood. I understood at a very young age that it's like, we have been here before, and it spoke to a sense of me that I understood beyond my years. And as I've gotten older, I've recognized this in many different art forms. Even right now, I had a few friends that keep telling me, watch the OA, and I started watching it. And I'm only a couple episodes in, but I've recognized very quickly that this is the same concept, where we have to remember who we were before we came to this vessel. And then once we remember who we are, because there's going to be a lot of forgetting, every time we come back to this earth, every time we come back to do this video game, we forget. It's a reset. I call it a video game for a reason, because it's literally a reset back to a checkpoint of where you left off before. And depending on how dense or how heavy your past life was, you're gonna have those memories more prevalent in your body, in your acoustic records, than you do in this human form. And so then you're gonna become this type of human where you literally think, I'm supposed to act and be this certain type of person. If you have murderous thoughts, you think that you're a murderer. If you have villainous thoughts, you think that you're a villain. If you have superhero thoughts and you think that you're a martyr for the cause, you're gonna think that you're the person who has to save the world, right? There's a lot of different virtues that come with this type of spiritual awakening. And when you, as the human, say, I get to choose if I want to replay that video game of that last past life, or as the free will human that I am, I have the opportunity to carve out a new path, a new way of being, a new life for myself. That's the part where we say, when we talk about reconditioning and rewiring our mind and all of the practices that teach you heart coherence. Thank you, Joe Dispenza, love that man. And all of the other practices, again, like Neville Garber, who's teaching you about manifesting and state of being. These are humans who recognize that I need to be a vessel and a mouthpiece to what my soul has already conquered and completed. And if I can do this in such a way that brings us back to our centeredness of, yes, we are human first, but secondly, we are a soul consciousness that needs to complete its work. The spiritual journey is literally about learning how to prepare your soul for its next journey. If you allow your soul to hijack your body and go back into past life remembrance and start doing things where it doesn't feel connected to you. Like we say this all the time when you're partying. I talked about it. When I was in my 20s, everything I did literally of the world. I drank super heavy every day. I don't think anything's wrong with drinking, but if you're abusing it to a point that you're doing it to escape or forget, it's abuse. I used to go out and sleep around a lot. Again, it's okay to have fun and enjoy the body and the flesh. But if you're doing it again for escapism, you're not taking awareness or at least being mindful that there are other humans involved in this and their emotions are involved as well, and you're hurting people and leaving a trail of pain, that's an addiction as well. You have to, again, recognize, even with intelligence, if you're the most intelligent person in the world and you learn how to conceptualize things that are happening actively in this world, and logically speaking, this is the only truth that matters, and logically speaking, this is the only thing that we recognize because we're discovering it now and we understand it, you're also abusing your intelligence because you're not expanding past what we call limitations of self, right? The only thing science has proven is that it only understands what it's ready to understand once it's in front of it and gives it the visual capacity to see it. If a human can't see it, then they say it's not real. That makes no sense. I know a lot of people won't agree with that statement, but there's so many things that are discovered every day, because we're taking the time to open up our vessel and allow our spiritual journey to give us the message that is meant to give us, and give us the formulas and all of this information to then go out and try to make it tangible in this world. Again, the reason that humans right now are obsessed with AI and robotics and different things of technology is because we're literally finding a way to replicate ourselves. In some sense of it, we're playing God, because remember, we are God, manifested and incarnated in his body, just fragmentations of it. And so we're trying to make sense of ourselves by doing it in a way that we only know how, which is through technology. We don't know how to create flesh. Of course, I'm sure there's some science out there that they found a way to mimic the cells and do all this stuff, but it still doesn't have what we call the God particle. Chemical X, whatever you want to say once you get into anime and stuff. It's that particle of life that it can keep creating and creating what seems from out of nothing and nowhere, and yet can never be destroyed, no matter how much we try to replicate it. We as humans are not that source energy. And that's why the spiritual journey becomes such a profound experience for someone who can wake up one day. And here's how I told you, my journey happened very simply that way. I woke up one day after partying really hard and heavy, and this was beyond, I've already talked about my being in the hospital for a week because I got a cat bite, and how that, made me realize my thumb could have got amputated, and all these things. Life could have just changed so drastically, but everything worked out. I still went out when I got out of the hospital, went out and partied again just as heavy, like nothing ever happened. And that was the moment of my awakening, which is, you are choosing to repeat the past. If you really cared about growing from your past life self and going to the next level of ascension, then you have to stop this behavior of destruction. And so that was the moment when I realized I was on the train in Chicago. And it's just one of those very beautiful movie moments where I'm in Chicago on the Red Line, and everybody knows it. You're going from the Belmont, Addison area, and you get to like the Wrigley or whatever, and you're going from, I think like you're Addison, and you start going down, you start going underground. And in that moment of transition of seeing everything above and going down into the tunnel to then do what takes you to downtown Chicago, it was like going through a portal, a literal portal for me. And I was like, I need to change. I need a new environment. I need to replant myself somewhere else so that I can feel myself actually root, because I wasn't rooting there. I was floating around, becoming whatever anybody wanted me to become, doing whatever anybody wanted me to do just to fit this image, right? I was a party boy, I was a drinker, I was the vixen, I was out in the streets. And that's how people remembered me, you know, fortunately and unfortunately, because at the same time, it's like, people got to see a sense of my energy and personality. I love that. But it was also masked through pain and distortion. And I didn't want to be remembered for that. And so that was the moment where I was like, I need to change. And at the time, a friend of mine was like, I'm moving to San Diego. For whatever their reasons were, that had nothing to do with me, I saw that as an opportunity to start over. And I was like, I'm gonna go too. I'm gonna pack up, it was no thought. I packed up everything. I said, I told my job, they were about to promote me to a new position, a new title. I just started a new title and position, and I was like, yeah, I'm quitting. I'm leaving in a month. I didn't have a job lined up. I had nothing. And that part of me, I'm still really amazed by, because to this day, I'm like, I don't know if I would be that brave to do that, but I literally was like, yeah, I'm quitting this job in a month. I'm moving to California. I don't know what's gonna happen, but this is what I'm gonna do. And I saved for a month, got to California. Me and this friend drove across the country. We got to San Diego. We stayed in like this, like, I wanna call hostel type apartment, dorms, I don't know. It was very clean though, it wasn't bad. It was just like a bunch of international students. There was an international school down the street, and they had these like dorm-like apartments where they stayed, but then also you could rent it out as somebody who's a transient just trying to start over. So me and this friend, we shared like a dorm room, and like on the way there, I was applying, and this is when applying was easy. I was just applying, going on Craigslist and all these other places, and I found a job at a coffee shop. First being a supervisor. So they literally hired me over the phone. So by the time I got there, I had a job to start that following Monday. And I went and started that job. And I could take like old bagels and stuff home and all this, and we'd go to the supermarket and buy that super cheap meat that's like 25 cents a packet. If you know, you know. And we had like a toaster oven in there, and we would just make like bagels and sandwiches and whatever we had to do to thrive. And then finally they got a job, and then once we both had jobs, we were like, okay, it's time to look for an apartment. And we finally found an apartment that we like in like the North, I forgot what it's called, North Park or something, over by Hillcrest in San Diego. And we got an apartment, and it was beautiful. And I remember the moment that I was so grateful, and I cried, and I said, I'm just so happy that I have this opportunity to start over fresh and allow myself the space to be who I want to be. And that's exactly what I did. That's when I became vegan. That's when I got into nature. That's when I started to recognize the universe for what it actually was. Because if you've ever been to California, you understand how scenically beautiful it is. I mean, the cliffs and the ocean, and then the sunset, like I thought it was fake, but the purples and the orange and the pinks, it's real. It feels so like ethereal, like another world you've never been in. It felt like a fairy tale. And until this day, I will never take away from what that moment was. But even myself, when I say some things went down where I allowed myself to start falling back into old patterns. Heavy drinking, going out partying, searching for love, looking for some sense of comfort versus remembering that I am that sense of comfort. I am that sense of balance. And so I would feel guilty because I thought like once you're on the spiritual journey, you're supposed to be able to like know how to fix everything. You're supposed to just know how to be good instantly. And that's not how it works. Like I literally thought like, and I was a super vegan. Like I was a raw vegan for a while. I didn't eat any plant-based stuff. I was meditating all the time. I was speaking the guru's talk, you know, alignment and spirituality. It was all beautiful. You know what I mean? I did an ayahuasca trip and all that stuff. And I always tell people, I won't take away from what ayahuasca represents. What it truly does is it reminds you that you are not in control of your physical body, no more so than you are in control of where your mind wants to go and be released to if you take away the barriers and boundaries that you put on yourself. And so, knowing that, I was like, towards the end of my stay in San Diego, at this time I was dating someone. We had an apartment, we had a dog, I had this job that I loved, but it was all manufactured. Because I do distinctly remember, at this time, this person told me, like, listen, I have goals and things that I want to create. I don't see myself in a long-term relationship. And I was like, no, please stay with me, please stay with me. And I remember these days, I can't believe I cried for somebody like that. But at that time, that's who I was. I was a lover boy who was just desperate to have love because I didn't know how to love myself properly. And so when I did that, eventually the person, they got enough guts to say, listen, this is not what I want. I got a house. You're not coming, the lease ends, you can keep everything here, but I'm starting fresh. And it broke me. It literally broke me. But I needed to be broke because at that time, they were very spiritual and they created their own products and they made everything from scratch, and they had a certain mindset that they wanted. And I was drinking all the time and sitting on the couch and indulging in other substances and stuff. I mean, it was California, and you can figure out what it was. And that wasn't their life. That's not what they wanted for themselves. So even when I go back and reflect, I can see how that wasn't fair to them. Old me would have blamed them. Or I would not even say old me, old part of me would have tried to blame them because I wanted to not let my pride and ego be hurt. But when I'm the type of person that I was along on that journey enough to know that I was like, if that's not what you want, that's not what you want. If you're not a partier or a drinker, why would you want a partner who's always partying and drinking? And so I had to own that for myself because, again, having them wasn't enough. Even being with them and practicing their beliefs wasn't enough because that person at the time is who got me into veganism. And I still thank them for giving me that lifestyle because I enjoy it. It's not something that I want to push on other people, but I enjoy that life of knowing what I put in my body, choosing where it comes from, trying to at least study or research as much as I can where it comes from, and just being self-aware. So I thank them for that, but it was, again, I wasn't there for the right reasons with them. And then even when we got a dog, they didn't want the dog, I wanted the dog. And so it was like, I was putting all these things on them that they were like, this is not what I saw for my life. And so and then the job I had was always known that it was gonna be temporary. They're like, this is a year job. We don't know what's gonna happen, but we might close. And so I still lived my life like I was gonna have that job forever. But once it actually ended, I had to leave. Like, the job ended, the apartment lease ended, the man was gone, the dog got rehomed because at that time I could not handle all of the responsibility of not having a job, not having a place to live, not having my man. So I was like, I'm sorry, I gotta just focus on me. And so that's when I went back and started traveling again and was going up north to, I went to Mendocino County, which was beautiful, and I traveled further north to Portland, Oregon, and I was hanging out there and just meeting really nice people. And I thought I was gonna live there for a minute. But a sense of me was like, you don't belong here. I should have stayed, but I think I was trying to fight it too much, and I just left and jumped in the car and started driving back towards Chicago, because I was gonna go back to Chicago. I was like, forget it. I may as well just go back to Chicago. But something stopped me in Iowa, and I ended up staying there for a minute. And a bunch went down there that I will tell for another time. But I was definitely not living my best, healthiest life. I have felt stuck. I was working temp jobs and factories and places that I would never want to be in for my whole life. I was seeing people live these lives as it was fighting for these titles and jobs at a place I would never. And they thought that I was coming in to take their job. And I'm like, love, I am in college right now. I do not plan on staying here. I have bigger dreams for myself. They tried to offer me a full-time job. I rejected it because I was like, I don't plan on staying in this town. So right before I was about to leave again, I got a temporary temp job at this office where I just was working there for a month, and the people liked me, and I ended up getting hired in. Fast forward, this is the same job that I've been working for 7 years now. So I'm so grateful to that opportunity because it opened a whole new world of communications and media and art, which is how I came here. I wrote one blog, and I talk about that. I had the opportunity to write a blog, and that was the first time where I realized this is what the spiritual journey is about. Remembering who you were and who you want to be. Don't let the flesh fall to what the distractions are and to temptations. Because it's very easy to blame the world and then go get drunk and go party and go hook up and just say this is my lifestyle and surround yourself with a bunch of people who, again, trauma bond, because I met those people throughout my whole journey. They were trauma bonding and saying we're friends, but I was like, you guys are drunk every night doing the same thing, complaining about the same stuff. And no offense to them, but that's the density I talked about. They were ice. They were freezing themselves in a time and place that said, I can't do any better or any worse, so I may as well stay here. And I was like, I'm fluid right now. I'm water. I can't stay stagnant here. That's not who I am. And so I allowed myself to flow to the next journey and allowed myself to keep going. And I'll say it, there's been a few times where I've ascended to my steam level and I came back to the earth because, again, just like any, like I think it's Jay Chanty, I can't remember his last name, but it's kind of like the monk theory. You can only go isolate for so long before you have to come back to reality. And so you go off and you isolate. And I went up to Minnesota and Denver and the mountains and different places and just meditated and really was off the grid, again, living by myself and just doing my own thing. And I got back to that higher self of consciousness and sense of self. And you probably can go back to some of my old archives. It's linked down below, the EQ with JAH archives. And I have old videos of me just in the mountains and all this. And you can even see the difference in my weight. Very skinny. I wasn't eating. You can tell I'm eating now, but that's okay though, because I'm happy. But it was just like learning the journey of self. And so the reason that I love documenting along the spiritual journey, the reason that I call it along the spiritual journey is because it's never going to stop being a journey. It's a process of learning the self, rewriting my script, rebranding my mind, and rebirthing myself into who I want to be every single day. And so when I talk about the beginning of the journey, you have to remember that it's all a choice. The spiritual journey is a choice. Once you choose to understand that I am not going to live forever, so what do I want my legacy to be? What do I want my soul to return to? Because if you hurt people, and I know some people don't believe in this, and they say, well, why do good people end last and bad people seem to win? On this earth, it looks that way because we call it what we call it. When people say it's a spiritual prison, it is. If you are unaliving people, hurting other people, being disrespectful to self, being nasty and rude, being overindulgent, doing all this crazy stuff, guess what? You're gonna be born again on this earth in a new body and you're gonna have to do it all over again. And that's why we have so many new babies in the spiritual realm who come into this earth and they're like, I don't want to be here. Earth is ghetto. Because they're remembering, I've done this before. I already did this. I don't want to do it again. And unfortunately, I'm not going to talk too much on the topic, but that's why some people take themselves out because they're like, I don't want to do this again. I would rather leave this earth and deal with the ramifications of not being here, and I'll come back 1,000 years from now. I'll come back 100 years from now. Because as souls, we get to make that choice. Now, it's like a school in the spiritual realm when you graduate. You're still gonna be stuck at a certain grade if you don't graduate Earth School. So if you decide to take yourself out, you're gonna have to come back at your own decision, but you're gonna have to come back and finish. And depending on what part of history it is, you just have to learn how to live through it. And so a lot of us, we come back and realize, like, depending on how good or bad we are, some of us are sentenced to certain lives that we have to complete because in our past, we were horrible people. In our past, we were very martyr people who were self-loathing and didn't care and was like, I'm gonna do what I wanna do. I'm gonna have fun. I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna take that, and it's mine, and I ain't hurting nobody. Like, there's people who steal all the time and they ain't hurting nobody. But again, you're not doing the work. You're taking from something that already did the work and produced it for itself, but you took from it without asking. And so now that thing feels lost and it has to go back and redo and regroup to get what it tried to make for self because you stole it. That's why we see, even if you go down the realm of cultural stuff, if you see a group stealing so long from other groups, eventually that group is going to fall apart and have a sense of necrosis or a sense of psychosis because they don't know who they are. If you have no identity because you've been stealing other people's identity for so long, what do you think is going to happen when you have to actually look at yourself? You're not going to know what you're looking at. You're not even going to know who you are. That's why it's important that every person, every group does its own work. It doesn't matter what the group looks like or who they are, because I don't need to name anything. You can, if you're smart, you'll figure out what I'm saying. I'm not picking out any certain group because every group has its flaws. Within those groups, there's that group, they still have their hierarchy of who they think is better or less than and how they treat those people. So you're still gonna have to do ancestor work. That's why it's important to do shadow work, ancestor work, past life work, all of that. It's important because they're all separate, right? And as you get deeper into the spiritual journey, that's when you become more advanced in who you are and what you're learning and what you're teaching yourself. And then by default, other people are going to recognize what you're doing and learn from that. I always tell people, don't try to jump in and do everything at once. The best thing that you can do is learn who you are first. Learn who you are as a human being first, a human being feeling, a human being. Once you understand that a human being is simply a vessel, you cannot get attached to this life. I know that people want to, but again, I have no say how this body, who I absolutely love and adore, is going to pass. I have no say in that. But I do know that this body is going to pass. So I have to learn how to befriend my own body, love the inner child of who I was, raise that child back up to the adult that I want them to be, which is me representing this person speaking to you. And then from there, allow my soul the honor and legacy of finishing its past lives as the avatar to complete its learning and understand that it's like you cannot keep allowing yourself to feel victim to the past that you created. Once you recognize that, that's when the soul is able to release all its heaviness, melt away, become fluid in self, because the soul has to remember its dualistic properties, which is the masculine and feminine energy. When you fight your masculine energy, then you get stuck in your feminine. When you fight your feminine, you get stuck in your masculine. You have to learn how to love both equally. You have to learn how to express both equally. Masculine and feminine energy is not about body parts. It's not about how you talk. It's not about what you wear. It's literally about the fluidity of knowing, how do I protect and love and provide for myself? I gotta eat, I gotta drink, I gotta sleep. Okay, I need a job, I gotta have provisions, I gotta do certain things. That's masculine energy. The feminine energy is, how do I love, how do I care, how do I heal, right? How do I love myself when I'm falling apart? How do I heal myself when I'm not able to have something around me to help me heal faster, right? It's nice to have a doctor or medicine to do it, but sometimes you have to know how to heal yourself. How do I nurture myself? How do I sleep? What do I put in my body? How do I eat? Those are all feminine energies. So when you understand that that's important to preserve the human body, it's also important to preserve the soul consciousness. That's when we awaken to that self that says, I see who I am. I see who I'm supposed to be. And then you continue to say, now what do I want to build? This is where we get to that, what we call the higher self or ascension process, which is, okay, well, I can help my human body and my soul body for myself personally by being a creator, by creating content, by creating an archive of information and data that is there for anyone's use to go back and catalog and recognize themselves in the journey and use it on their pathway. I am here to be a bridge and leave little tools and provisions for those once they get to this level of the journey. I've always known that about my journey, and I've always known that about my process. I just didn't know what it looked like for me. That's why I call myself a spiritual tour guide, because I'm just here to say, well, there's that part of the journey, and there's the meditation port, and there's the dark night of the soul section, and there's that. You can try to skip them, but you can't. It's like an amusement park. The longer you avoid the roller coaster doesn't mean that, eventually you're gonna be like, I rode all the rides, except that one. And it's gonna be like, well, I don't like roller coasters, I'm scared of heights. Okay, well, how you gonna know what's on the other side of finishing this until you do what you gotta do to complete this journey? And so once you finally say, let me get past my fears, and you get on that roller coaster of fear, and you say, okay, I did it. Again, you ain't gotta love it, but you gotta do it. That's the part of learning emotional intelligence. That's, again, why on this journey, you have to understand that the emotional intelligence part is, again, the bridge between the human self and the spiritual self. And when one is falling apart, the other has to hold the other up. And when the other is holding the other up and it can't get to where it needs, and it needs a little boost, that's what the other one's for, right? So when I'm having a hard human moment, like a relationship ending or a job loss or relocation or something else, that's where my soul has to be like, it's okay, baby. This is a fresh beginning. We're just gonna plan again, start again, take as long as you need, but we gotta get up tomorrow and we gotta get this thing done, right? Then, let's just say life is lifing. You got all the provisions, you got the money, the job, the house, everything's great, and your soul's like, I feel depressed, I don't feel happy, I feel lonely. And that's when you're human can say, it's okay. You're not always supposed to feel like you're supposed to be doing something. It's okay to just rest. It's okay to relax. That's a huge part of the journey as well. Nothing grows always in movement. It has to sit still at some point to plant its roots so that it can get the nourishments that it needs from the universe, from nature, from the earth, from the womb. The womb of self is, again, how we love ourselves in darkness. How do you love when no one is watching? How do you love when no one is looking? This is the spiritual journey. So again, when you begin this journey, it's not about trying to be the most perfect vessel. It's not about trying to be the most perfect, pristine soul. It's definitely not about being the most well-educated and all of the teachings from the past and this and that. Those are great to know, but it still doesn't change that you still have to do the work as a human and be disciplined in the practice every single day until you leave this earth. That's the part that most people are weary of. That's the part that even some of the strongest spiritualists fall wayside to because they forget you have to do it every day until you're gone from this earth. Your soul will go on, and when it's released, it's released. But until then, you have to give the body the ability to experience life. You have to give the body the ability to understand how to experience unconditional love from self, to then experience love of others. Because yes, love of others is conditional, but when you have unconditional love of self, then you have the ability to love others through their process unconditionally. You understand? No one is perfect. It's not about, again, being perfect. It's about recognizing that everyone is going to get to where they need to be, how they're going to do it based on their level of awareness and the checkpoint of the video game that they decide to take off from and step back into, and understand that, again, it's a practice, it's a discipline. Once you know the spiritual journey, and once you know you're on it, once you're awakened, you're not done. It's not, oh, I'm done, I made. No, you literally walk across that bridge of unknowing to known. And the fact that once you know, it's even harder because you can still see all the discourse and all of the famine and all of the pain on the other side. And there's nothing you can really do about it. Why? Because all you can do is focus on building something that the other side can look over to and say, I want to be over there. How do I get over there? And the best part about this is there's no bridge that you can physically cross to get there. You have to let your body ascend to the next level, go from that ice state to that water state to the steam state, to then either you float over and find a way to climb up, or you ascend over, float over, and let yourself rematerialize in the world that you could decide that you want to be in. Then once you're on that side, it's about continually doing that work without becoming egoic, without thinking that you're just God's gift to the earth. Because there's been plenty of times when people think, well, you think you know it all. I don't think I know it all. I know what I know of what I've experienced, and I know what I know from what I've seen, and that's all I can tell you. There are going to be plenty of people out there who are going to tell you, this is the exact way to do this practice. This is the exact way to manifest. This is the exact ritual. You have to do exactly this way. If it works for them, it works. Remember, wherever you put your energy and wherever energy flows, it will work. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You know what I mean? Like, I've learned that as a tall person. Just because you fit don't mean I'll fit. I gotta go find where I fit because physically I can't fit there. So spiritually, there's some things where you will not fit there. So every practice is not gonna work for you. You gotta test it out, what works, what doesn't work. For me, I do what I call universal energy practices, where the universe is my God. Everything in the universe, everything that exists is spiritual to me. The table is spiritual because it allows me to sit up and not hurt my back and eat off of and serve off of and work off of. The cup is spiritual to me because it gives me a vessel to drink nourishment, fluids out of and give back to my body, right? Everything is spiritual to me. So for me, nothing is over or under the other, it's just there. So I see things as a wholeness. When you see things only in polarity, you're only going to live for that. That's why we have the patriarch. If you only see things in the masculine viewpoint, take, destroy, conquer, versus protect, honor, love, then that's where you're gonna live. If you only live in the matriarch, which is forgive, forget, let be, let love, light, great. Okay, well now you're just tender and soft and anything can attack you. And I know that sucks, but you gotta keep your shell. That's why you have to know how to integrate both. You have to know how to be both. You have to know how to be loving, soft, and kind, but you also have to know how to be a spiritual baddie where it's like, not over here, because I still got hands. Like, I still am human. Like, you're not gonna disrespect me. So that's the part that's important. So again, remember that the journey is about how you pace yourself, how you get there on your own terms. It is not about being the most pristine, being the best at mantras, being the best at rituals, being the best at knowledge of all of this stuff that we talk about. Again, you're not better than someone because they're not awakened yet. Because yes, there are people out here who we consider horrible people and they manifest and materialize easily because they live in that material world. So they understand the material world is very simple. You just have to take. As long as you gather and take a bunch of stuff from others, you'll get what you want. Doesn't mean that your soul is going to ascend. And that's part of the part that you have to remember where it's like, we're on a different path. I can't worry about how they're getting theirs and what they're getting. I have to only worry about me. And if that means that everything that I want is not materialized instantly, at least I know that my soul is healed. At least I know that my heart is healed. Because if I did pass right now, I'm floating so high, baby, that ain't nothing gonna be able to touch me. I will not come back to this density. I already know that. I've said that many a times. When I leave this earth, I know that I will never have to come back to this earth world again because I'm beyond its teaching. I know everything I need to know. As far as what it's gonna, I already know the patterns, I already know the beliefs, I already know what it is. So that's why I kind of had to just let go and let God and be who I needed to be. And so from here on out, all I can focus on is giving what I can give back for the next generations. And that's my spiritual journey. So I hope this makes sense. I hope that when you get on this journey, you don't feel discouraged, you don't feel overwhelmed. You will, it's gonna happen, but I hope that you find a way to allow yourself to realign to, again, your sense of being and love that it's okay that you don't know everything, okay? So take your time, go at your own pace. You will find your way across that bridge and find a safe space. Anywho, thank you for joining me along this spiritual journey. I am your spiritual tour guide, JAH. And as always, I love you. And of course, check me out in my links down below, epicenter.org, digital products, services, merch, all of the above. It's all there for you. Thank you for support. Love ya.